Rams House, ESPN released their grades for all 32 teams' off seasons, and you are not going to believe the grade they gave the Los Angeles Rams. On today's episode of the Rams Report presented by PrizePicks, we're going to break this thing down and talk about just how wrong ESPN's Seth Walder is on his grades. And I just got to show you this, guys, because you're not going to believe it. They gave us, I kid you not, a C+ grade. A C+ grade for the Los Angeles Rams offseason. Yeah. It is pretty unbelievable. I couldn't believe it when I read it. My producer Santino couldn't believe it when we were getting ready in the studio. It just doesn't make any sense. I think, you guys know I'm biased. I think we're all kind of biased around here. But I honestly believe that this Rams team had the best offseason in the NFL this year. And to rank us as one of the bottom 11 teams, like, you can disagree on the best. You could say, okay, you know what? It's just a top 5 offseason. And I'd be like, all right. You know, that's understandable. No argument from me there. But to put us in the bottom 11, the final third of every team in the NFL, that is just absolutely ridiculous. Guys, if you agree with me that this is already insane and you're already there, drop a like on today's video. If you think the Rams had the best offseason in the NFL. Guys, we got Myles Garrett. Need I remind you, the man on my shirt, the best defensive player in the NFL, is a Los Angeles Ram right now. And that's far from the only thing they did this offseason. I truly believe we had the best offseason in the NFL. And on today's video, we're going to prove it. And to do so, we're going to go point by point on Seth Walder's argument. So here's his rundown. Every one of these grade segments, they started with a little rundown that looked like this. They gave us the grade, C+, which, gosh, that's just disgusting. Biggest move of the offseason, in their opinion, and I think, it's the biggest move in the NFL this offseason, the Myles Garrett trade. What else could be the biggest move? The thing they liked the most, Jaylen Watson signing, and the thing he disliked the most, the selection of Ty Simpson. But he also had a few other sticking points with the Rams offseason, which we will discuss one by one. But let's start with his thoughts and feelings on the biggest move that any team made in the NFL this offseason. In my opinion, the best move that any team made in the NFL this offseason. The Rams trade to go get Myles Garrett. As I've earlier said on this video, the best player in the NFL on defense, arguably the best player in the NFL, period, is now a Los Angeles Ram. But Seth Walder, not nearly as big of a fan of this move as I am. Here's what he had to say. Los Angeles dealt edge rusher Jared Verse along with first, second, and third round picks to acquire the Browns superstar. Verse alone offers more surplus value, which is a term you're going to hear a lot on today's show. The difference between what he is being paid versus what he would be paid on the open market than Garrett over the next 2 years. Even though Garrett will make below market money from the Rams, Verse is also a very good edge rusher. And he emphasized this cannot be overlooked, who is making next to nothing. That's the surplus value point there. Garrett for Verse straight up would have been reasonable and a win-win, even with the surplus value loss. But the addition of 3 picks, including a first rounder, is too rich for me. I honestly think you kind of stand alone on that, Seth. The value here, from my perspective, in what the Rams gave up to go get Myles Garrett feels very fair. It feels just about right to me. You gave up Jared Verse, who we're going to talk about in a minute, is nowhere near the edge rusher that Myles Garrett is, and you gave up some additional draft capital to pry him away from a Cleveland Browns team that didn't really want to give him up. At the end of the day, they wanted to have him as part of their long-term plans. You had to make him an offer that was hard to refuse, but this is the best defensive player in the NFL, and you only had to give up 1 first-round pick to go get him. At the end of the day, I think that's a win. And we're going to continue to break down why Walder's wrong about this trade on today's show. But before we do that, I got to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, our presenting sponsor here at Chat Sports, America's #1 sports picks app, PrizePicks. Guys, if you love daily fantasy or you just want to add more excitement to watching sports, you've got to try out PrizePicks. And it's a great time to get started on PrizePicks too, with the World Cup underway, professional baseballs are underway, and they've also got season-long projections on professional football. And guys, it's never been easier to play daily fantasy than it is with PrizePicks. All you have to do is pick from 2 to 6 players, and you can select more or less on their stat projections, whether you're picking from points, assists, rebounds, hits, home runs, strikeouts, regular season starts. They've also got rushing yards, receiving yards, those on those season-long projections with the pro football, which is one that I've actually got going right now. I'm taking the less on Mendoza's starts. I'm taking the less on Jeremiah Love's rushing yards, and I'm taking the more on Jordan Tyson's receiving yards. And you guys can tail or fade that 20 to win 120. It's super easy to do so on PrizePicks. All you have to do is drop a follow on my account. I'm Jackson Durham with no spaces on there. And if you're brand new to PrizePicks, before you follow me, make sure you use our promo code when you sign up. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with PrizePicks. The clickable link to download the app is in the comments in the description below. Let's get back to this, because I'm going to make a point here. And I'm going to do it as respectfully as possible to Jared Verse, but Myles Garrett is much better than Jared Verse is. Because I think part of Walder's argument here rests on the notion that there is not a significant difference between Myles Garrett and Jared Verse. He even outright says a straight-up trade would have made more sense. No, it would not have. That never would have happened. The Cleveland Browns never in a million years would have straight up traded us Myles Garrett for Jared Verse, because they know, as well as the Rams do, as well as you and I do, that he's better, that Myles Garrett is markedly better. The numbers don't lie, friends. Put this together last night, and even I was a little bit surprised by the gaps in certain areas. Myles Garrett, and again, I want you to remember here, less opportunity to rush the passer, so I changed the numbers from raw numbers and raw pressures and sacks to rates, because I think that better exemplifies Myles Garrett's impact. Because again, this Cleveland Browns team has been so consistently bad that he has not regularly had an opportunity to get after the passer nearly as much as Jared Verse has. Because just think about it. If you are losing a football game, the team you are playing against is going to run the ball. They're going to try to control the clock. They're not going to start throwing it a bunch. And as Myles Garrett, that takes away your opportunities to get after the passer. But despite it, he still sacks the quarterback at 3.7 times the rate that Jared Verse does. A 3.7% sack rate to just a 1% sack rate. He has a higher pressure rate by a whole percent. Both of them are elite at pressuring the quarterback. Hurry rate is the only thing, QB hit rate and hurry rate are the only things that Jared Verse has going in his direction here. And to be honest with you, those are a huge product of not finishing the play, which has been a huge consistent issue for Jared Verse throughout his career. And then if you look at the run game, it's not even close. Tackle for loss, Myles Garrett is more than doubling Jared Verse as far as generating havoc plays on run defense goes. He is a complete edge defender, both as far as getting after the quarterback goes and being devastating against the opposing run game. Jared Verse, I truly think has the potential to maybe one day become that. Maybe. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a guy who has an opportunity to be a couple-time Pro Bowl selection, maybe an All-Pro if he's really lucky in his career, if he really hits the ceiling. I think that's what Jared Verse is. He's that kind of a player versus a generational, 1 in a million defensive talent. One of the greatest defensive players to ever play our game. That's what you're talking about with Myles Garrett. I just truly think that cannot be overstated. It is a difference to me. And respectfully, I think that matters. I think you can, as Rams fans, we can still respect Jared Verse and what he contributed to Los Angeles, but still also recognize that Myles Garrett is so much better. The idea that these two players are 1-to-1 is just not true. At the end of the day, it's just not true. It's a pretty silly notion when you look at the numbers. If you ask me, it is a pretty silly notion. But Garrett was not the only blockbuster move that the Rams made this offseason. And Seth Walder had some criticism of our other move as well. Next up today, we are going to talk about Walder's feelings on the trade for Trent McDuffie. Let's get into this portion of the video here. Here's what he had to say. And once again, he felt like we gave up too much value. They also dealt first, third, fifth, and sixth round picks to the Chiefs in exchange for Trent McDuffie, whom they promptly extended at $31 million per year. I think McDuffie is fantastic, but this type of trade, giving up premium draft capital for the right to pay a player market price, rarely makes sense. It's an even tougher sell for a cornerback, given how variable the position is from year to year. Again, I just disagree. I don't understand how this is an overpay for an all-pro corner, for a top 5 corner in the NFL. You're giving up a late first-round draft pick and some additional capital on top of that. Maybe you could argue throwing in the third is a little bit much, but at the end of the day, this is nickels and dimes to an organization like the Rams, which has proven itself so capable of managing these kind of situations. And I think that is what a guy like Seth Walder is missing here. When he assesses these trades, when he assesses these things, I think he's just forgetting that this is not foreign, uncharted territory for the Rams as a franchise. This is a franchise that has drafted once in the first round since selecting Jared Goff in 2016, and the player that they drafted, Jared Verse, is no longer on the roster. They don't value first-round draft picks in that way. They're totally fine to move off of them for proven veterans, for guys they know are going to work out, like Trent McDuffie. Because at the end of the day, they know, sure, they can take a swing with the 29th overall pick on a corner. They can hope that that corner works out for them. Yes, it might be more cost-controlled, but they also know right now Trent McDuffie is an all-pro talent at the corner position. And he's also an all-world human being who can come in and lead this room alongside his teammate, former teammate, continued teammate, in Jaylen Watson, a guy he's won Super Bowls with. Trent McDuffie himself, a Super Bowl champion, 2-time Super Bowl champion, someone that helped lead that Kansas City Chiefs organization to getting it done. And I really feel that that's a huge part of why the Rams feel it is, at the end of the day, yes, you could draft a Chris Johnson with the 29th overall pick. But Chris Johnson does not benefit this franchise right now the way a Trent McDuffie does. Chris Johnson does not bring championship caliber experience the way Trent McDuffie does. Chris Johnson does not bring the leadership element that that Trent McDuffie brings to this Rams locker room, and he certainly isn't going to bring Jaylen Watson along. Because something that Seth Walder praised this team for, Jaylen Watson, I think it's heavily connected to Trent McDuffie in the trade to go get him. This was the thing he liked the most about our offseason, which, hey, finally we're kind of on the same page about something. But he said they also signed Jaylen Watson in free agency on a $17 million per year contract. I thought this was a very good signing to address a need, and the Rams didn't have to give away any more draft picks. Again, I feel like this is the first time me and Walder are like, okay, I can agree with you on something. This is a cost-controlled contract. I think the value here is very good to go get a guy as talented as Jaylen Watson was last season. I think he's incredibly underrated. I think a lot of people around the league nationally are not familiar with his game, but they will be very soon because he is an incredibly talented player. And $17 million a year for a corner of his abilities, when you look at the modern corner market, it is really excellent value. But I challenge you here, Walder. Do you think Jaylen Watson is as likely to take that kind of value contract if his teammate Trent McDuffie isn't also in Los Angeles? If the Rams don't go out and make that trade? I think these two moves are connected. So the criticism you have of Trent McDuffie, At the end of the day, can you do both of these things? I challenge you there. Speaking of which, let's talk about other moves that feel connected to me that Walder criticizes. Ty Simpson. Here's his thoughts on Ty Simpson. Like many, he's not a fan. On offense, the Rams extended Stafford, guaranteeing him $50 million in 2027 and ensuring the reigning MVP would stick around, but they swerved drastically from their Super Bowl window maximizing approach when they drafted Simpson with the 13th pick. Selecting a player who won't play without a Stafford injury is the opposite of maximizing their current window. And it looks even stranger after the Garrett trade. It's not because backup quarterbacks don't matter. They do, but a veteran backup could have been had for much less. Okay. So again, I feel like I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh right now, and Seth Walder just activated my trap card. Because this is the argument that I made. I really feel like this is one that I'll hang my hat on for years to come. Because at the end of the day, the Rams would never have made the trade they made for Myles Garrett if they did not select Ty Simpson. This is something that is very clearly laid out in this video. Not to toot my own horn, but this video right here very clearly lays it out. How the Rams could never have gone out and traded for Myles Garrett if they did not use their first-round pick, the 13th overall pick this year, really Atlanta's first-round pick, on Ty Simpson. Because they were not going to move off of future draft capital without knowing that they had a succession plan in place at the quarterback position. And now, and again, I know a lot of you guys disagree. I know a lot of you guys are not on the same page as this Rams organization on this front. But organizationally, they feel they've found their franchise quarterback. And that opened up doors. That opened up paths for them. Paths that included being as aggressive as they were to go trade for Myles Garrett. Again, you do not get Myles Garrett if you do not draft Ty Simpson. And I truly feel, because he does also add that he thinks taking Ty Simpson at the 13th overall pick anyway would have been a reach. You can't reach on a franchise quarterback. If the Rams are right and Ty Simpson ends up being the heir apparent to Matthew Stafford, 13th is value for a franchise quarterback. 13th is value for a guy who ends up succeeding a Matthew Stafford and guiding this Rams franchise for years to come, like the Rams believe that he can be. Of course, if they end up being wrong, then of course you can call it a reach. But right now, I think it's left to be determined. I really don't see how you can say it's a reach at this point. He rounded out with this. While I have been critical of some of their moves, I appreciate the Rams' aggression and willingness to pursue a championship. Their strategy undoubtedly has increased their probability of success, which is worth commending. How much it affects their probability to win championships after 2026 is worth debating, but there's no question that the Rams are mighty dangerous right now. Does that sound like the description that you write when you're giving a team a C+? Just like asking, let me know in the comments if you think it does. I certainly don't. What is that? They certainly improved their opportunity to win this season. They're mighty dangerous right now. They did more than anybody to maximize a window to win a Super Bowl, which, might I remind you, is the number one goal of being an NFL team. But we're going to give their offseason a C+. Okay, I don't know what we're doing here at ESPN. All right, but if you guys don't agree with them, if you guys think this whole thing is pretty unbelievable, and you think that the Rams, in my opinion, rightfully so, had the best offseason in the NFL, then drop a like on today's video before you get out of here today. That's going to round it out for today's episode of the Rams Report. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'm going to see you tomorrow for a brand new video.